Thomas? You seem particularly triggered right now. Can you tell me what happened?
I've had dreams that weren't just dreams. Am I crazy?
We don't use that word in here.
Welcome to Mitchoy Chats. I'm Michael J. Foy.
I am Frank Mitchell.
I'm Mike DiGoia.
And tonight, The Matrix is back to revolutionize your reloaded revolutions of resurrections.
Yes, all the R words.
If they make more, they're clearly going to keep using R words.
Well, for another R word, you should revisit www.mitchoychats.com for all of the latest and greatest of our exploits.
We've got tons and tons of content for you, the people.
But yeah, this I was so excited when I heard that there was another Matrix coming out, and
I couldn't believe it.
Me neither. Like when they were like, "Hey, the new Matrix is happening," and the way I heard it was the original directors on board, and I'm like, director or directors, and they're like, yeah, it's Lana Wachowski, and I'm like, okay, that's cool. It's it's one of them, but I don't know, something bothered me by both of them not being there, and it didn't bode well for me going into it, but it bummed me out because I'm a guy that like I saw the first one in the theater. I loved it. I was so enamored with it. Just the world building and the way that it led into 2 and 3. I was a big proponent of 2 and 3. I was a diehard fighter for 2 and 3. Whenever anyone was like 2 and 3 sucks, I'm like, yeah, compared to 1, definitely. It's like it's gonna suck. Anything's gonna suck compared to 1. But
well, they still had their following though. Like 2 and 3, like I have talked to a handful of people. I know that's like a regular, like a typical consensus is that 2 and 3 are really no good. But I know a handful of people who are just big, fans of that franchise. Who are totally. I mean, I have another buddy of mine. He was a huge fan of 2 and 3. He thought everything was tied up nicely by the end of 3. And he dug the entire trilogy. And I've talked to a few people like that. So it definitely has its following. It's like kind of both. It's almost like a Zack Snyder movie in a way. Like 2 and 3 it's like people either love it or just hate it. So I can understand that. It was never as, was there a reason, Frank, that it was, because I know you said it was kind of like, it was ultimately a very near and dear trilogy.
It was for me because it was sort of like it was like a Blade Runner moment for me. It was like it was seeing something I never saw, and I feel like it's kind of trite to say because most of the world could say the same thing about it, but like it was something I never saw before. It put forward ideas that I had never thought of before. It turned a lot of expectations on its head, and it was just a completely different ride that from anything I was used to seeing at the time. And I was 14 at the time when it came out. I think I just turned 15, and my dad took me to see it, and it was just one of those, like, I came out of it and I'm like, this is unbelievable. Like, and the kid in me is like, the guns and the fucking shooting and whatnot. But the other part of me was like the philosophy and the thought process behind it was so thought provoking, so interesting. And when 2 and 3 came out, and expanding on some of the ideas, I feel like it got a little lofty in the things it wanted to do and what it wanted to say. And I feel like 3 was I sometimes joke, and I'm like, it's sort of like the Kill Bill setup of part 1 is all the fighting and part 2 is all the talking. I feel like for the Matrix, I feel like part 2 is all the talking and part 3 is all the fighting. Because I feel like part 3 is the nuts and bolts of this is the final fight between the machines and the and the humans. But I don't know. I just watching, for me to say that, I don't mean to say that I think the Matrix trilogy is as good as Kill Bill. But in any case, I don't know. I just 2 and 3 still held their place for me, and like I know that there were fans of it. Like I'm definitely a fan of 2 and 3, and I will definitely defend them tooth and nail. And I find it kind of funny now that people's response to Resurrections has caused them to change their feelings about 2 and 3. People have not enjoyed part 4 so much that they're going back and saying 2 and 3 are at least better than 4. Which I actually kind of find kind of funny, but in either case, the Matrix was something I grew up with and I've loved. And when I heard they were making another one, I was ready to go. I was excited and I was ready to let it do whatever they want, let them do whatever they wanted to be. Like I enjoyed the 2 and 3 kind of subverted the expectations. And I feel like that's ultimately why people didn't like them so much, was mainly because they wanted to see something specific and they didn't get it. And maybe that's my problem with Resurrections, but I ultimately felt like where they took it in Reloaded and Revolutions was still very interesting and very, very fun compared to what they did with Resurrections.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm revealing my hand a little bit in how I feel about this latest movie, but in any case, I feel like that's my overall feeling of the Matrix trilogy.
Yeah, the first one for me, like, you know, we talked about before, I saw the Matrix movies when they came out. I did enjoy them to a degree, and I kind of I left it behind. Like, it never really, you know, for me, my last great 90s movie was Starship Troopers. And after Starship Troopers, I kind of like...
How do you top that? Like, I don't mean to interrupt you. How do you top fucking Paul Verhoeven?
It comes down to like it's like an appetite, really, because we've talked about this a lot of times about, you know, when, you know, after the, you know, I would say like that 95 to 97, like after that, there was a lot of great movies that, like, you know, especially Tarantino spawned, like, you know, those more independent films like your Pulp Fiction, your True Romances. Set all that stuff. I mean, those were great movies, but like, you know, The Matrix came out a couple years after that, and it definitely redefined the genre. It wasn't just concepts; it was like visuals and action that wound up, like, you know, changing a lot going forward. And it was funny, like, even though I watched them and I enjoyed them. Again, like I said, I kind of moved on, but I was still, in a sense, I don't know if I would say excited, but I was very intrigued by another Matrix movie coming out 20 years later.
Yeah.
Because it's like, okay, this is a movie that kind of redefined the genre, you know, both visually, action-wise. So what is a Matrix movie in that sense? Not just ideas, but what is a Matrix movie in that sense going to look like, as far as, like, I mean, the action genre has kind of been rewritten again with, like, The Raid and John Wick.
Yes.
You know, I mean, you see, there is, like, every time you see anyone handling a gun in a movie now, you see John Wick written all over it. And just, like, the high octane intensity of, like, The Raid. So what is a Matrix movie gonna, like, is it gonna, like, be able to, like, redefine things again? Because I feel like a lot of the stuff that you saw in Resurrections, if that came out back when the original movies came out, I think people would be a little more wowed. But it's been 20 years, you know, and, you know, before I saw Resurrections again, because I revisited the whole trilogy. I hadn't seen it. We talked about this. I hadn't seen it in 15 years because I wasn't, you know, huge into that universe. So I watched 1, 2, 3, and 4 back to back over the past, like, I would say, few weeks. So I kind of have the whole trilogy for the most part kind of fresh in my mind. Yeah, so that's an aspect we can talk about with Resurrections, as far as how, like, you know, obviously the ideas put into the movie is going to be a big thing we'll talk about. But again, like, just what a movie like that would look like, you know, in an era where the action genre has kind of been redefined again. So I was kind of intrigued by that alone. But again, I had to kind of revisit the first ones again. And I got to say, like, as far as like the trilogy, I get why people are really into it. And there's definitely room to expand that story from the first one. And Reloaded is not a bad movie. Like Reloaded, I think, you know, it pushes it like as far as it can really. And there's still great visuals in it. I still think that highway sequence is actually pretty cool. I was kind of like surprised by that. That holds up pretty well.
Yeah, I feel like there are a couple fights in there that, like, like the fight between Neo and Seraph. Like, I feel like personally, I watch it, like I rewatched it recently as well, and watching anything from the first act, I'm like, any fight involving Neo, I'm like, well, who cares? I'm like, you can fly away, you can blow people up, you can do whatever you want, you can rewrite code, you're a god. I'm like, why are you even bothering to fight? Like, who cares?
Exactly. Like,
so there's some things that, like, it's so cool, but then you think of it one step further and you're like, this makes no sense.
I thought the first movie, because like rewatching it, I really dug the first movie. I thought the first movie was just a gut punch of ideas, visuals, and action, like all rolled up into like one, like, you know,
cohesive thing. Like that was like, it makes sense.
Cohesive, concise story, essentially. And yeah, of course, with that, there's definitely room to explore. But my whole thing with that too is like for me at least, the first movie explored enough for me to be satisfied with. When the next movie, like I lose it when it becomes like, you know, is this real? Is that real? Am I the one? Yes, you are. But do you understand why? You understand why, but are you going to act on it? And when the whole movie is just a constant, like, what is this? What is this not? You know what it is, but it's not really that, but it is. Like, I'm like, all right, I'm fucking like, it's not because
that's how I get whenever I hear the word destiny in a movie. I hear the word destiny in a movie. I start shutting off. I'm like, you better move along, dude.
Yeah, and it's not a matter of like not understanding what they're doing. It's more a matter of like, I mean, you know, that's why I love like.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just feel like it sounds like what you're saying is like the philosophy and the ideas that they put forward in the first one made sense, and they didn't have to get all lofty and up their own asses about it. They just kind of put the ideas forward, and that was that. Like, you have one scene of a kid asking, or a kid saying, you know, there is no spoon, and you're like, oh fuck, okay, and like that's kind of you hold that in your head for the rest of the movie. But I feel like with this, I do agree with you that there are moments of like, you've made your choice, now you have to understand your choice, and I'm just like, dude, could you stop with this? Like, could you like just stop?
It just gets kind of like narratively tedious. It's just more like that's always why I've always been drawn to much more grounded stories, with great characters and themes and, you know, action, whatever it is, like throughout like a much more like kind of grounded narrative.
Yes.
But when the narrative is being, and some people like that too, it gets your mind thinking like in different ways. And again, it's not a matter of not understanding it. It's more of like an appetite. It's more of like, I don't really like love watching that. Like, I'm not as drawn to those types of stories. That's one of the reasons why I like, you know, I kind of stopped watching Doom Patrol. I was watching that show Doom Patrol. That DC show, and it's got great stuff in it. What was that?
You felt too doomed, so you had to stop.
Yeah, pretty much. There was just so much like all over the place of like traveling to this consciousness and then that world and then this timeline and then that timeline and then this reality, that non-reality. I'm like, all right, fuck off. I'm like there's cool stuff in it, but you know, it's just when it's like just a hodgepodge, and that's sometimes what the main like. The Reloaded kind of felt like a little bit narratively, but again, I don't think it's a bad movie. Like, I mean, I think it's like well enough. Revolutions was so much of that movie was the battle sequence, and it wasn't particularly a great. It was just more so like a bunch of like, you know, this is what we can do with computer generated effects. There was no real like tact or guile to the battle sequences. It was just a bunch of like, you know. Dudes, you know, people in mechs just pointing upwards and shooting constantly. And some of them
it looked cool, but after a while you're like, okay, we need to move here. Yeah,
it looked cool here and there, but again, there was no like tact or guile to the the sequence itself. And at that point too, like as I was watching that, I'm like, oh, I get what they're doing with the story, but at this point I didn't feel like I was watching The Matrix anymore. Like just because that first movie like redefined like, you know, the genre, like the action genre and the sci-fi genre, that like when I was watching that whole battle sequence in Revolutions, I'm like, and it was a lot too. I'm like, well, this doesn't even feel like the great movie that redefined everything, you know? So again, I get why people are into it and there's room to explore it, but like, I'm kind of like, the first one was, like I said, it was just that gut punch of everything.
I really feel like that is what it comes down to. And I want to get Mike Foy's experience with the trilogy before we move into Resurrections. But I really agree with you there. Just like the parts 2 and 3 don't necessarily feel like an extension of, especially 3, feel like an extension of the great first film. Yes. that was put forward, which I can definitely agree with you there. I feel like there's a good number of Smith becomes almost comical. This like mustache twirly sort of evil, like you know what I mean? Like it's again cool ideas that they put forward in 2 and 3. I think the idea of an agent being able to insert themselves into a body is a cool idea. And again, does an idea mean that a movie is good? Not necessarily, but I feel like The Matrix had more throwaway ideas than most movies have ideas. So I feel like there's a sort of a level of like, I love even the small ideas that they have and the small little things they do, or like the thought conceit of like, you know, like old programs are, you know, for lack of a better term, like the Draculas and the werewolves of that world. Like they can only be killed certain ways. They have to, you know, but I thought that was a really cool idea. And I just, again, like there are so many points with 2 and 3 that I'm like, oh, that's neat. Oh, this is a cool way to explain this, or oh, this is a neat way to see that. Like, I think that it did subvert expectations and it just did different things. And that's again why I feel like they did hit. But again, I'm getting off on a tangent. Mike Foy, what is your experience with the Matrix trilogy?
I mean, I basically saw. I don't think I saw the first one in the theater, but I remember renting it like a couple of times until I got it pretty quickly once we got a DVD player, and just kept watching it with my friends. I mean, it was mind-blowing. I mean, you just hadn't seen anything like that before. And there's certain movies that come along that visually do things that could just completely change the game. And sometimes there are more subtle things that build over time. And then, obviously there's some movies that are just like the first Matrix. And there's just nothing quite like it before and nothing quite like it after. Obviously, everybody tries to imitate all these different things. It's just like Blair Witch. Blair Witch came out, was a big phenomenon for how it decided to tell a story, and everybody tried to rip it off and just did it so piss poorly. I mean, everybody did Bullet Time after this. Like, it was the whole Max Payne game series was built on it. So it became a thing where it really was just everywhere. And I remember the hype for the second movie, and I saw the second and third ones definitely in the theater. And I really liked the second one, and I thought it was pretty solid. And I thought it had a lot of really fun and interesting things in it. This idea of all these different like programs and like these different personalities that they had, like the twins with the highway sequence. Like there was some really fun and interesting stuff in it. But I think that the problem for me with the second movie was just when it gets to the end, when he has this confrontation that just goes on for 15, 20 minutes. It feels like it's probably only 5, but it's just it's like, what is this choice? And it's like, these are all really interesting thoughts, and it's a really interesting way for the story to culminate, because I do like the ideas that they're presenting through that whole I can't even say the word exposition dump, but it's so confusing and confounding in a lot of ways. And, I understand that these are movies that definitely benefit from seeing, multiple times, and you'll pick up on little details and et cetera, et cetera. And that's totally fine. But it was just so confusing that I felt like I left the second movie being like, yeah, it was good. It's good, right? Yeah, it's good. Yeah. And then it was like, let's wait for the third one. Then the third one came out, and everyone's kind of like, cool, trilogy's done now, huh? Yeah.
When that second one came out, like legit, my brain was like, all right, cool. So they spent the last 10 minutes just reading the dictionary to me. I'm like, what the fuck was this? And but my fifth or sixth time seeing it, I'm like, okay. I'm like, all right. Now it's starting to make sense.
I mean, I have seen all of them multiple times, and I will say that having seen them multiple times, I definitely understand all the different things that they're going for. And you're right. I mean, there's so many concepts that they just like throw out willy-nilly. I mean, they have more ideas that they can possibly count, and they're swinging for the fences. I mean, I'll definitely give them that. I feel like each one, unfortunately, for me, is kind of like each one's like a half star less, and it just each movie all the way down to the new one. They just keep trying to stretch this concept and try to bring it somewhere new without really doing a lot with it. There was something that felt like the first one was this really well-balanced action philosophy, sci-fi. I mean, it just had a lot of fun things, but it was very balanced. The second movie was a little bit more unbalanced, but was still pretty balanced overall, even with what happens at the end. The third one just felt lackluster, and I felt it at the time I saw it in the theater, and I remember leaving thinking that, I didn't hate the movie, I enjoyed it, and I felt like overall it seemed to do a pretty good job wrapping up the story, and it was like, all right, these motherfuckers came to a conclusion, and they realized they got to work together, and hopefully now it looks like a brighter day, right? Brighter future. And it was kind of like, all right, we can kind of leave this alone. But there was something about all of it that just felt kind of lackluster. And it never, as many times as I've seen all three of them or rewatched the third one, there's just something about it that feels hollow. And I think that happens a lot with the Star Wars prequels for me. It happens a lot with anything where the environment is so heavily CGI. Yeah. That there's something that's just sort of lost there. And I think it's kind of just a product of the time it was made in. And this new movie, it suffers from some of the same things, but then it's suffering from, obviously just new things that have happened over. It is crazy to think that the first Matrix came out, over 20 years ago.
Honestly, it's staggering to me.
It is so hard to believe, but yeah, everything has been completely reinvented since then, and I feel like you can watch that first Matrix and feel like, yeah, this is still pretty fresh. This is still pretty cool. It's still very, the whole first movie, I think, is pretty relevant to today. But the second and third ones, they just start to get too bogged down in their own philosophy. And this new one, I think, really just crosses the line with that, because the whole time it's debating its own existence, which I can appreciate on the idea of it being, commentating on this. I didn't think it was a terrible idea that the computers had programmed Neo essentially to be a video game developer, and that all these Matrix things had been developed into a game. I didn't think that was a bad idea. What I didn't understand was that every time they showed quote-unquote footage of this game, it was the movie. So if it's a video game, then why does it look like a film? And if it's supposed to be a representation of this, and Smith is still existing now, but he looks different, and
he's a dude, bro. Now.
All these other people, some of them look different, and some of them, don't. There's some interesting justifications for those, but ultimately none of it really adds up properly, and it just feels like something you had actually said, Frank, that there's just a lot of really interesting concepts that are not they're not executed well, and it
Yes.
feels like through each of these Matrix movies, they've just been unfortunately less able to articulate what they're trying to do in a very like fluid fashion. It starts to just feel kind of more chunky, and then you get to this one and you're like, this is like, I started in like a creamy tomato, and now I'm somehow in a New England clam chowder, and I don't know how I got here.
That's what's so funny is like the first one. I feel like part of the reason the first one was so wildly popular is because it managed to take so many interesting concepts and roll it into this delicious little roll that so many people could digest. Like I've shown The Matrix to so many people over the course of my life, and no one has said to me, "Oh, this was awful," or "This sucked." Like not one person has said that. Like everyone has been like, "That's pretty cool." Like that was awesome. Like it just it hits on so many factors and gets even the most pedestrian of people to be like to get interested in philosophy and the self and something, just concepts like that I think are so interestingly put forward in these movies. For parts 2 and 3 to put forward more ideas and for them not to land as well, I feel like is ultimately what my problems came down to with them. Like I love them so much, but I feel like 2 and then 3, I feel like the ideas that they were going for were progressively more and more kind of lofty, and people were like, all right, take it easy. Because I like the idea of at the end of 3 of, if I can't defeat you, like at least let me solve a problem that you can't solve, and, we'll figure it out from there, and maybe we can figure a truce from there. I think that's a more realistic ending than one blows the other up sort of thing. Like I think it's just a neat way to take it that you wouldn't have thought of before. And I appreciate the subversion of expectation in a situation like that. And going into this latest movie of Resurrections, my first thought in seeing these trailers was, why the fuck are Neo and Trinity here at all? At all. At all. They're dead. They're dead. We're done. They're dead. What the fuck? Why are they here? Like, like the whole thing, like just seeing that trailer, I'm like, all right, it's raising questions, but I feel like the questions it's raising, the answers are going to piss me off, which bums me out because like I don't want to be mad. Like I want to be excited seeing a Matrix trailer, but like I saw the Matrix trailer and I saw them in it, and I'm like, why are they here? Like I want it to be good so bad, and it's just like I'm just getting the feeling it's not going to be.
So was it them like being kept? What was it in Resurrections where? Because there's definitely a few things that I would probably need to watch it again to like pick up on some other stuff, which I'm not sure is going to happen as far as rewatching it again or anytime soon. But what was it with them where they had to be like close enough with each other, like because they were the source of did they become the source of energy for this new like program?
Yeah, basically,
somehow they are like the sole source of energy or something.
They're a great source, or they found that they could extract the most energy from them by keeping them close but not together.
Yeah,
when they were together, that was when they were at their most powerful. I personally, I have to get in here and just say real quick, I like the weakest part of this trilogy for me has always and will always be Neo and Trinity in love. Like just like it is just like this tacked on bullshit that like is just complete garbage. Carrie-Anne Moss is the only thing that sells that relationship because she like I love Keanu Reeves, but let's be real, like he just can't. Like Carrie-Anne Moss is selling that relationship between the two of them, and I buy it for the most part, but it is unbelievably like it just doesn't work on any level other than like seeing Carrie-Anne Moss sell it that little bit. But like that is the weakest part of the trilogy for me. So for this movie to like center around their unity, like made me want to throw up. Like because I'm just like, great, we're centering this around the one thing that I think is the weakest part of the trilogy. Cool. Like let's roll.
Well, that was one of my complaints. Unless I missed something, that was one of my complaints with the first one. Where at the end, when he gets shot, was he brought back to life specifically because of her love for him?
It's the thing. I don't know, but it makes me want to throw up either way. It's without it not the worst part of that movie. Even the implication that her love brought him back to life.
Because that was a little bothersome. Like that was
Yes.
one thing. It's like you have a movie with like brimming with all these wild concepts and ideas, and are you telling me he's coming back because of love? I mean,
exactly. Get the fuck out of here. I just can't.
I mean, can you maybe justify it by being like, well, he was, the one, and maybe he had to be that in order to be able to still come back? But
maybe there's a Jesus parable there of dying and resurrecting, and then there's the thing of the oracle says to him, she says you're not the one, and he goes, she's like, maybe you're waiting for something, and he goes, what would I be waiting for? And she goes, oh, your next life, maybe, who knows? And then he has to die and then come back again to be the one. Like, it's cool, interesting, like foreshadowing and shit like that. But at the end of the day, like, to make it he comes back after Trinity kisses him, I'm like, no. I hear you. Like, it's just weak. I don't really, it's whatever. Like, it's just not good. And then to have parts 2 and 3 just kind of build it up further, and then part 4 be like, well, this is the majority of what this story is about. I'm like, wonderful, great. Like, but
it's interesting that they keep showing the two of them, like, when they would touch and, things get explosive and, whenever they get together, it's like a nuclear bomb or something. That is kind of what happens in the first one when they kiss. It's like, there is such a, like, big explosion of energy.
There's so much power in their love and their unity.
Listen, there's no doubt that is the implication. It's supposed to be about the love and blah, blah, blah. And that's, like, fine for some people. I mean, I always kind of, I guess looked at it as that's what it is, but I mean, these are supposed to be somewhat magical people, I guess, who have some sort of magical powers. So I don't know. They kiss and she electrifies them with her lips back to life. Like I don't know.
Right.
I don't know what else to do with that.
Did she do it? Did she do it, or did he do it? Because he's the one.
I think they both did it. I think it's the two. No, I think it's the two of them together.
Like, and that's what's so funny. It's like one of the first drafts of the first Matrix script, the people weren't batteries. Humans weren't batteries. Humans were processors. And the reason Neo was so special is because Neo was able to run admin privileges and things like that to get in and out of certain things in the Matrix, which is why he was so special and why the rebels wanted him. So it's an interesting way of kind of like putting forward the idea of like he's special for this reason, instead of it being like, well, they're in love, and when they're in love and they're together, the magic can happen. And I'm like, fucking fuck off. Like I get so aggravated hearing it. Like, and again, I think the other part of me
it comes off as like a cheap explanation, because like the whole fourth movie, like you're saying, is built on this concept, and the architect goes over it so arbitrarily, and it's just like, every time you guys get too close, like, it was Chernobyl, and I couldn't have that. So, it's like, so there's some sort of, fusion, and you have to keep them perfectly balanced, and it just seemed very convoluted. But I also didn't understand, like, the 60-year time jump, and, like, how have they been kept alive and barely aged over 60 years? How long was it that there was this machine civil war that took place? Why wasn't the movie about that? That would have been way more fucking interesting. What if are these like clones? Did they just clone human beings? Like, there's no real explanation as to how any of that happened. It just doesn't really work, and I see what they were trying to go for, but it just, none of it really comes together very well. It's just, everything feels very like hollow and sort of empty, and it was weird to have this like version of Morpheus that was programmed as an agent, and then he is like a new version of Smith, but he's a nice guy. Like, there was some weird, interesting concepts being thrown around, but I keep coming back to that the execution is just it's just so haphazard. It's so lazy. It just
so much of
it's
it
the complete
doesn't make sense.
opposite of what that first movie was. That first movie was all something new and things you'd seen before, but packaged all together in this new way. And then this new movie is just pure regurgitation. That's what it should have been called.
Like, I think what bothers me is there's to sum up my feelings, like to give you the quick pill version of my feelings about Resurrection.
Is it a green pill?
It's just a fucking crunch it with your back molars and die. Because honestly, number one, action. Action was garbage in this movie. Action.
Yeah, what was with all the force pushing?
This fucking even not barring that, just every action scene was this Paul Greengrass fucking shaky cam bullshit. That, and I'm sorry, like that is not what the Matrix is. I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. I know I have no creative control over the Matrix, but when you say the Matrix, you think at least stylized fight scenes, choreographed fight scenes, storyboarded fight scenes. This was fucking trash. Like this was fucking garbage watching these action scenes. Like they really bothered me.
You feel so basic.
I thought the train sequence was the biggest victim of that, because that was a pretty that could have been a really cool sequence.
Yes, like there are so many cool things, little ways they could have made it awesome, and there was just nothing.
It was kind of like oddly filmed. The fight between him and the new Smith wasn't bad.
It wasn't bad, but it wasn't great. Well, I kind of just kept wanting to see the original fight.
Yeah, that's the thing with this movie, and I kept hearing that before seeing it, was like everyone was pretty much just like about everything, like the story and the action. I'm like, oh shit. I'm like, that's one of like, because as far as the story, like there are like aspects of what the whole like meta concept of everything, like there were aspects of it that I'm like, okay, I can maybe see how this could be a next chapter in this universe. Like there was, like we keep saying, there's intriguing aspects to it, but it all kind of like comes to like it revolves. It comes back to that whole same thing with love, and then it just ends on a big like thud. Like there's just kind of nothing really there.
Well, I really didn't understand how suddenly, like, you know, Trinity was never the one, never had any of those powers or abilities. Suddenly, she seemingly has all of the power and ability, yet Neo still has some of the power and ability, and then she can fly, he can't. Then they go and confront the architect. Then they're both clearly back to being like full super god beings, and then they both fly off together. So when did Neo relearn to fly? Because the scene you showed us, he couldn't fucking fly.
There's also a cover version of that Rage Against the Machine song at the end of the first Matrix.
You're right. You're fucking right. There is. It was all those. It's all those little things too. That just like, what the fuck are you showing me? Like, what is this supposed to be?
Yes.
It also didn't help. It also didn't help too that by the time Trinity like was back into the whole game, there was like 15 minutes left of the movie.
100%.
Right? Like
that was another aspect of it where like part of me is like, did this concept maybe need 2 movies? I don't, because I still like the idea of making a movie and not having a trilogy always in mind. You know, just to make like a single experience. But like, I think that was one of the problems with this movie, with the whole Trinity thing, was that she really she was like an aspect of the story from the beginning, but in more of a vague sense until like it was, I really think it was like only 15 minutes left when she started becoming relevant again. And that was kind of it. You know, like they didn't really.
It just seems so odd, because I agree with you. Like she comes back in towards the end. I feel like the implication was that their unity was what made both of them so powerful, or like one or the other. I don't know what they were trying to go with here, but another thing that was interesting to me is Jonathan Groff, who played the new version of Smith.
I did like him in this, though.
I did. I enjoyed him, but I mean, like, honestly, like, I feel like, frankly, like, this movie is hurt by the absence of Hugo Weaving and Lawrence Fishburne. I feel like it is hurt by it. Like,
well, that's the thing. Oh, I'm sorry, Frank. Yeah, I was interrupting.
No, it's all right. I was talking about Jonathan Groff and how he was talking about Lana Wachowski's process for basically how they would do action scenes with the first Matrix compared to this one, and he basically like tied it to her transition of, previously, before she transitioned, her life was in such chaos that they had to storyboard everything. So, everything was meticulously storyboarded and shot that way. And now that, she's in more control of her life, she just kind of is able to shoot, what happens and stuff like that. And I'm like, fuck you. I'm like, what? Fuck off. I'm like, exactly. I'm like, it makes it like you're trying to tie like her transition to also like part of her shooting style. I'm like, get the fuck out of here. I'm like, The Matrix has always been about action. Like, I don't care what anybody says. Like, The Matrix was always about stylized action. In addition
100%, it 100% was. The entire thing was built on it, especially because you have all of Neo fighting like a billion Agent Smiths at the end of the third movie. You can't just do that willy-nilly. Like, it requires an insane amount of choreograph. That's such a bizarre thing to say.
It really is. But I also... No, go ahead. I've been talking long enough.
No, it's all good. I was just going to say, like, it's like in Fast and Furious when they say the series is really just about family. I'm like, yeah, I'm sure that's like the number one concern, right? And not like,
It becomes about family. If you watch them all in order, you realize that they don't start talking about family really until the fourth one. Then it's like the fifth one. They're like, yeah, we love family. Yeah, it's like it took you guys like 5 movies to do this.
It's about family and also stunts and special effects that have no place in the real world.
Yeah, and also,
but like honestly, like I think what just bothers me about it is like I came to this movie excited to have my mind blown, and I feel like the first act is a lot of basically Lana Wachowski all but coming on screen and saying, "Look, I didn't want to make Matrix 2 and 3, okay, so we're going to try to fucking fuck around with it a little bit and change it around." And I'm like, why am I being like fucking like penalized almost for liking 2 and 3 almost? Like, that's how I at least felt while watching it. I felt like there's this whole level of like Neo is being like, oh, we got to do this. We got to make this. We got to make a new this, that, and the other thing. I'm like, all right, so this is Lana Wachowski being berated to make the latest Matrix. And these are her feelings on it, I guess. Like, it felt very like, the metaphysical aspect of it to me like seemed cool at first, but as I'm watching it, I'm like, all right, so this is Lana Wachowski's story about why she didn't want to do this or why she didn't want to fucking be pushed into whatever. And I'm like, that's why I was talking to you guys. I was like, I heard it perfectly if someone referred to this movie as The Matrix New Nightmare. Like, it's basically about the making of the original series and how it's affected the world and how they're going to change things this time around. And I just like it. I felt like, cool, if you're going to do that, like, cool. If your first act is we're going to be this metaphysical about it and this metatextual commentary, I'm into that. But let's go somewhere cool with that. And then when your second and third act, you're basically like, all right, and now we're going to pretty much redo the first through third movies again. Here we go. Like, it landed with a complete fucking thud. One of you guys said it earlier. It just like, it was hollow. It's just boring. There's nothing interesting about it. There's nothing different about it. And then there's this level of like, oh yeah, well, they're giving you the same action sequences, because that's what you want. And I'm like, no, this is me, the audience, telling you that's not what we want. That's not what I want. There's this level of like, they're trying to be cool and slick by telling you, oh, well, audiences don't want cool stuff. I'm telling you, we want cool stuff. Like, we don't want the same thing over and over again. Yeah, haha, nostalgia is a nothing comforts anxiety like nostalgia. We get it, fucking fake Morpheus. But guess what? Like, we also like new shit too. Like, 1999 was an awesome year for movies. Like, just looking at the amount of movies that came out in 1999 that were so vastly different from one another. Like, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for some spice in our lives, not the same fucking thing over and over again. Like, that shit pisses me off when people are like, everyone wants the same fucking thing. Like, no, we really don't. Like,
yeah, it seems it's always the assumption. I thought it was strange that a movie which literally shows clips from the original and features, half the original cast or some of the original cast, not even half, but to redo that opening the way that they did, and to have these, like, I guess, quote unquote, different angles of the movie, but it was like, what was the point of recasting Carrie-Anne Moss, in the opening? Like, I feel like they could have, if you're going to use so much footage from the first movie, you could have just used the footage of the original sequence and, like, recolorized it a little bit if you want, or you make some tweaks or something. Like, I feel like you could have then made, if you needed a body double, like, you wouldn't have to show her face. It was very strange to be like, wait, that's not Trinity. And be like, what is this? And then there's just no explanation, and then we just have regular Trinity later, like nothing happened. It would just, there was a lot of, like, these weird, confusing decisions that were made that just, I don't know, I didn't understand.
I still can't get over the idea.
What half of what they were going for.
Exactly. I still can't get over the idea of, like, because according to the end of The Matrix 2, this is that was the sixth version of the one. That was the sixth iteration of Zion. So, the architect specifically says to Neo, he goes, "You're the result of a fucking anomaly. That no matter how many times we rebuild the Matrix, you always come back in some form. Yep. In one person or another, someone always becomes the one. It's like the Dalai Lama. We can kill you, we can reset the entire Matrix, but you eventually come back. So we're trying to figure out a way to have you not be here anymore," which, like, is a cool idea. Like, for a machine to be like, I can't figure out this algorithm or this mathematical process. Like, that's a cool idea of a machine just going, I can't solve this problem. Like, and that is something that, like, for the end of 2 to be like, you're the result of an anomaly, and once you die, we can figure out how to redo it again. For it to be like, no, Neo and Trinity are special, I was like, fuck you. Like, yeah. I wanted it to be like, they're just the result of an anomaly, and they are special in this moment, but once the Matrix is reset, they're going to be nobodies. So, like, I just love that whole concept of, like, it's someone different every time. And this wasn't the first time the one has come up. Like, that's a really cool idea. Like, that's a really cool way to kind of modernize the idea of the Dalai Lama. Like I said, like I referred before, but I just, like, that's a neat idea to push forward. And for them to kind of just shit on 2 and 3, even though you can say whatever you want about 2 and 3, like, they at least had a cool vision that ended in a spot that you're like, all right, well, it seems like there's a truce and everything's all right for now. Like, we're good there. Like, it ended in a realistic spot, a spot that made sense to end it. You didn't need another trilogy, like, in between this and the new movie to explain whatever the fuck. Like, it was satisfying. It ended nicely. It's like, so for them to come back and be like, this is the story I want to tell. I'm like, this is the thing. This is what you reopened. This is what you went back to this well for, to tell this story that who the fuck cares? Like,
the Machine Civil War. That's the movie we want to fucking see.
That's the movie I'd rather fucking see.
It would be way more interesting. Like, what if you had, like, rogue machines who found the code for fucking Neo and brought the one
programs.
back?
Yeah, like fucking that'd be cool as fuck.
That would have been way more interesting. Why do they have to set it 60 years later? Like, I also don't understand. Is the Matrix always, like, I'm confused legitimately about the first one. Are we, like, moving forward in time in the Matrix, or is it always 1999? And if that's the case, is this new one, quote unquote, taking place in 2020, but it's 60 years later? Because I know in, like, the real world, it's supposed to be like 2290 or something.
I believe what goes on is, and if anyone who is listening to this episode after the fact or anything like that wants to correct me, tweet us or check out our Instagram or go to the website mitchoychats.com or whatever, get at us.
Do it now.
It was my understanding that when Joe Pantoliano is talking to Agent Smith in the first one, and he says, like, I want my body to be reinserted, I don't want to remember anything, and I want to be someone important, someone like an actor, like he's basically like, that basically told me, okay, so the machines can like reinsert a body and then can basically send out an update to all the humans in the world that basically say, hey, Joe Pantoliano has been an actor that you've known for years and you really enjoy him. So you're going to wake up tomorrow loving him. And then they wake up tomorrow and there's fucking someone has a poster on their wall of Joe Pantoliano and they've loved him for years. And fucking they just kind of reset that little bit in your brain to be like, nope, you love him now. You've known him for years. He's an actor. He's famous. Like, I feel like they have that control over humans in the Matrix. So I feel like by that extent, they could be like, yes, it's 1999. And then for New Year's Eve, 1999, we all go to bed and we wake up and it's 1999, January 1st, 1999. And we're going through the whole year again. And no one's the wiser because they're, the machines are telling their brains, no, you don't know what year it is. This is what year it is. And you're fine. And you keep moving. So I feel like there's a level of they can control and give us a perception of reality, which is why I thought it was interesting that there are moments in Resurrections where you see like reflections of Neo and he's like old, like very old. I thought that was a neat little idea, but again, it amounted to ultimately nothing because you're like, yeah, they can get in between how you look and your digital self projection. I'm like, all right, so what are they doing? He's old, and then he gets out and he looks normal. I'm like, okay, so he's not old.
Exactly.
I'm like, so what was the point of that? Like, what sense did it make to show you any of that? Like, I just, again, like cool ideas, but ultimately I'm like, I need like, and I really don't feel like watching it 5 more times like the other ones is going to amount to anything because I was just so disillusioned by watching this one. But
sure. I totally get that.
That's the thing. Like for me, like I said, like even like by the second one, I was kind of drained by the mythology of it all.
Yes,
I just kind of enjoyed. I enjoyed what the first movie presented. I thought it was a complete story. So in watching them kind of like so close to one another, by the time I got to the fourth one, while I can maybe see some of those ideas potentially panning out, I was just drained. I was like cinematically drained from the whole thing. Cause like, I don't, again, like those aren't movies I'm typically like drawn to. And it just, by the time it like, cause even like the whole Smith thing, I couldn't even really tell you what Smith was in Resurrections. Cause he kind of like, he had his final sequence in that coffee shop.
Yeah.
He kind of disappeared. Even Morpheus, Morpheus became pretty much of a background character, just like following people. Like he felt pretty insignificant too. Like there was a very like,
lackadaisical nature to one of the most important characters in the fucking story in the original trilogy. Like
everything just became and felt vague.
Yes, very much. And I feel like that's ultimately like what part 4 bums me out about is it's like, it's so like, yes, it's different than what I expected, but it's also like, it makes no fucking sense. Like, at least if there was like some sense of method to the madness in all of it, but I just feel like it's just a lot of like things to reference the original without like I feel like it's doing the worst things that a sequel like this can do. And I feel like some people have said, oh, well, that's the metaphysical commentary of it. And I'm like, well, yeah, but you can't be a shitty movie and comment on other shitty movies without being a good movie. Like, you can't, like, there's got to be some form of, like, I get you're making a comment on other bad movies, but that doesn't mean that you can also be a shitty movie. Like, you also need to be better. Like, so I feel like if you're going to make the comment, you can't say that. You know what I mean? Like, there's this level of, like, people want it to be smarter than it is, and I really don't feel like it is. And it was so funny because, like, as you're texting us talking oh yeah, I'm watching this, and I'm at this point. I'm like, oh boy, I'm like, I don't want Mike DiGoia to think less of me that I like these movies.
Oh, God, no, not at all. Like I said, man, like just because like I've never been one to be like, I don't understand why people are like, I can see why The Matrix was a big thing. I can see why the trilogy was a big thing. And like I said, I have a few friends who were big fans of the trilogy. Almost all of those friends, though, no one liked Resurrections. Like
almost all of those friends, I don't like any of them. So.
I don't like them at all. Garbage people. But yeah, like everyone was like, That's what I kept hearing. And these were people who were all into The Matrix, and I was never into The Matrix that much. So I'm like, wait a minute, am I going to wind up loving this movie or just not liking it at all? But like,
isn't it so fucked? I feel like I go into things sometimes like that as well. Everyone's like, oh, I hated it, and I'm like, oh god, I'm probably going to love it because I'm a fucking contrarian asshole.
But no, again, it was just another kind of like hodgepodge of like, mind fuck concepts that I just like. Again, I don't enjoy narratives like that specifically. Again, like I can understand it enough to like, again, movies like this always call for like a second, third, fourth viewing, yes, or whatever. But I feel like I'm being scolded already for like, and honestly, I feel like that's the term I keep coming back to of like, she hates the sequels so much that she feels like she has to like shit on them, like to be like, well, I was forced into making these, but like, okay, like I liked them. You know what I mean? Like, so I feel bad that you're talking to me about how you got forced into making them, but I liked them. You know, I had fun with them. I think that's for you. You got to kind of like separate. Like,
I need to get off it a little bit. I know
whatever the artist is, because I mean, there's so many situations. Like how many movies, TV, or whatever do people just love when the artist of those things were like, that was a terrible time in my life. Exactly. I didn't like that. Like, I mean, like look at Peter Jackson with The Hobbit. I mean, he came out and said like he just did not put his all into that. Like that was a very.
I thought you were going to say Brain Dead or The Frighteners, and I was gonna be like, don't you dare break my heart and tell me that he doesn't like those because I'll die.
Yeah, I mean, like,
I'm sorry. Continue.
How many people love Ghostbusters 2?
I will defend. Now I can turn and see. I have a framed photograph of Vigo, fucking the Scourge of Moldavia on my wall right now.
Lord Vigo.
It's Vigo.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a different. It's like I can't give her too much if she really feels that way. I mean, listen, those are the movies. She made that movie. Like as much as people might love or hate them, like if that wasn't what she really wanted to do, like
right, like, and that's the thing, like I can't reconcile that. I'm sorry to interrupt you again, but just
it's all good.
That sense of like her saying that basically, because it makes me feel, I'm like, I almost want to be like, well, what did I miss? That like, should I not have liked 2 and 3? Like I just feel this weird sense of like, and I know like at the end of the day, like what you like, don't let anyone tell you. But if the creator is telling me something, like I want to take that into consideration a little bit, right? Like I don't know, like I hear it and I'm like, all right, well, tell me more. Like I'm already watching the stories you're telling me. So what do you feel like?
Yeah. This is just like when I watched Toxic Avenger 4 and Lloyd Kaufman came out and told me right in the beginning, 2 and 3 were a bad time in his career, and he did it for the money, and they don't really exist, so forget them. And even though this is called Toxic Avenger 4, it's really Toxic Avenger 2, and you're going to love it. And I said, okay.
All right, you know what, buddy? You sold me on it. Here we go.
It is very strange, though, when directors, wind up doing something like that within their back catalog, especially when it's a series and something as popular as The Matrix. But
because also
oh yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I've been interrupting you guys all night.
Oh no,
the only thing I was going to say is, at least with New Nightmare, it was like Wes Craven had the fallback of, look, I dealt with 1 and I was involved with 3 a little bit, but apart from that, you guys fucked this up. So like, I can.
He was asked to come back and repeatedly asked to come back for that. So, like him sitting down and like watching all of the movies and being like, all right, let me see what I can do here. And literally just going, there's nowhere to go from here. Like,
Right,
you guys,
like you.
there's literally no story. There's nothing left.
Exactly.
But
for him to be able to say, like, for him to be able to go, like, all right, fine, I will say, but I'm going to make this comment about how it can get run into the ground sometimes. Like, sure, yeah, fucking make that comment because you didn't run it into the ground. But then something like this, where Lana was like, well, I didn't want to do it. Be like, but your name is on it. I'm sorry, but your name is on it.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, like, the events of those two movies still matter in the events of this fourth movie.
Precisely.
And this fourth movie is still a fourth Matrix movie. And even though it's an odd, like, kind of I guess it's a reboot. It's kind of a requel, but it's kind of not. It's kind of just a straight sequel. But it's also, it doesn't. I mean, honestly, it doesn't really know what it wants to be. It didn't pick any particular category. It just kind of picked all the categories, and it suffers because of it. It doesn't have a clear sort of path forward, and it winds up, the whole first half of the movie is just kind of rehashing the original Matrix, and it feels very rushed in comparison. And it is rushed in comparison. And there's interesting things happening, but then it just doesn't really amount to very much. Somebody just on the great and powerful internet just threw it out there like this was like an entire trilogy crammed into one movie, and that is kind of what it feels like.
Yeah, that is true.
I feel like it honestly, it feels like the first movie. It feels like it's trying to be this, like, Force Awakens of, like, it's because it is beat for beat. It is essentially the first movie of they are rescuing somebody who is imprisoned in the Matrix, and at the end of it, one of them is very, very powerful. It's the same story of they rescued Morpheus when he was taken by the agents in the first one, and they had to go back in to get him. And that was that. And
oh man, do you remember the weight of that moment though? Like the first time you saw that movie, and they're like, "We got to go in and get him," and everyone in that, like, all those characters are like, "You crazy?" They're like, "We're gonna fucking die. Like, these things are gonna kill him." He's like, "No, we have to do this." And it was like, holy shit! Like it felt like a real moment. Yes. And then they walk into that, and he's like, guns, lots of guns. And you're like, where is this going? And you get to that lobby sequence, and then you get to the helicopter sequence with the room shoot. It's just like, it's so fucking good. And the weight of the stakes really fucking, you just feel it in that first movie. And it's amazing how hollow this new movie was. It's so hollow. And it's unfortunate because, like, even the new guy who plays Morpheus, I can never remember his name because I'm an asshole, but he was in the new Candyman. He's a great actor. I really like him. And I think he does a really good job with what he has. But it's odd that it's not Lawrence Fishburne.
Right. And what he has is not good. Like, what he was given is just not good.
He's not given nearly enough to work with, and his character doesn't really go anywhere, even though he's a very interesting archetype. It's so unfortunate that it just leaves all these fun things just kind of hanging in the air. Just like Neo and Trinity hanging in the air at the end of the movie.
I don't know. I feel like end of the day, I'm going to have to watch it at least 5 to 6 times to be able to say, like, okay, I maybe understood this or that a little bit differently. But I mean, overall, like, if I
definitely want that report
times to love it, like, if I haven't watched a movie this many times to love it, like, I can't. Like,
yeah,
I feel like this is like Tenet all over again, where it starts off with the movie going, "Fuck you, you're not figuring this out." I'm like, great. I'm glad this is how we're starting.
Oh my god!
Why not just make that the first frame? Fuck you.
That is truly the one Christopher Nolan movie that just says "fuck you" for 2.5 hours.
Fuck you for watching this movie. Be like, yep, fuck me, right? Yeah. Fuck you for being a fan of Christopher Nolan. Sorry.
Oh god, it's so true though.
I feel like this is the same thing. I'm like, well, fuck me for being a Matrix fan. Sorry. Like, I didn't come in expecting, a great action movie, something that'll blow my mind away. Like, I apologize.
I think it's interesting of note that the latest Ghostbusters was not necessarily the greatest movie, but had so much more heart and cared so much more for its characters and its story, even if it wasn't even if it wasn't the greatest thing that's ever been put to screen or it's interesting to see movies that go back to that source material that are acting as direct sequels. We talked about obviously the new Halloween, and that one is fairly divisive, but the one before it, Halloween Returns, is overall pretty well liked. Like it's interesting. We're in such a strange time for movies, and you pick and choose what you want to make a sequel to, and what part of the story that you want to pick up, and what characters you want to bring back, or it is like such insane free for all right now that it just boggles my mind that the Matrix just literally said yes to all of it. It's unfortunate. I wanted to like this movie more, and I didn't go into it expecting to love it or expecting to hate it, and I came out of the movie feeling the same way. I didn't love it, nor did I hate it. It was just kind of there.
Well, you're much more charitable than I am. I feel like I'm much more hostile towards this movie, and I'm not even sure why. Maybe it's because I was expecting more from it than I was given. But
it's kind of like the idea of a Matrix 4 was always seemed like it would be a big deal, and they finally did it, and it's like, oh shit, they're making the Matrix 4, and then it came, and I feel like it just came and went, and it had almost like the complete opposite effect of the first. I guess you were never really going to replicate like the effect the first movie had. I'm not saying they were even trying to do that.
And that's the thing. I wonder to myself, what would that be? Like, and I guess I'd have to see it to know it. But I found myself watching this movie saying to myself, why didn't they get anybody that worked on the Raid? Like, why didn't they get anybody that just like in terms of an interesting, like, tense action sequence, and those were just like hand-to-hand fight sequences for most of them, and they were tense, they were rough, they were brutal. And I know I always go back to the Raid. If you listen to this podcast, I feel like you could pick out in every episode me talking about the Raid, just about. But I feel like if you're going to do interesting action, and you don't want to do it, get people who have already done it. Great. I don't get it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this could have been really could have been something. It's unfortunate that it was not.
Just a fucking nothing burger.
Goddamn nothing burger of just ones and zeros, just like the Matrix itself.
Huh?
Didn't see that one coming. Well, I think that about does it for our trip back into the Matrix. So let's go back to our regular lives outside of the Matrix, I guess.
Yes, watch the first Matrix.
Yeah, just watch the first one. Just take that little dip, just a little dip. Yeah, definitely.
You're feeling froggy, but
I agree with that. Definitely just stop at 3. It ends perfectly.
They're not going to exactly. Just know that they're not going to be as good as the first one.
Such diminishing returns. So make sure you check out MitchoyChats.com because we got a lot of good stuff up there.
You were starting to break up there a little bit, Mike Foy. I didn't hear you.
Oh, I was just trying to let the people know about MitchoyChats.com and how important it is.
God.
It's so important. We need to know. We need to know.
Mike Foy, you're doing the Lord's work by telling people about MitchoyChats.com.
Well, for Mitchoy Chats, I'm Michael J. Foy.
I am Frank Mitchell.
I'm Mike DiGoia.
This has been The Matrix. Something.